Hi, I'm Dan and welcome to Airbrush Garage. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. Today, I'm going to be doing an unboxing and a review on something that I've been wanting for, about 20 years right now. So, it is a custom Micron, and this is the new Takumi version. And I'm going to be taking a look at it. I'm going to tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it. And if you stick around, I'm going to show you two really cool, inexpensive upgrades that you can do to this brush that absolutely take this brush from a really great brush to an absolutely fantastic brush. So if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. Hit that bell so you get future notifications. Thumbs up would be great. A couple comments, good or bad, really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. Don't forget to check out all the links down below for the products I use in this video and all my other videos. And with that, let's get started. All right, so here we go. We got a custom Micron Absolute Precision. It's an Iwata by Iwata. This is their top-of-the-line brush that they have, along with their other Micron brushes. But as I open up the box right away, I see the packaging is like no other that they have for any of their other Iwata airbrushes. Again, I love all of the quality of all of my Iwata airbrushes, but again, this one is the top-of-the-line airbrush, so it comes with a microfiber cloth inside that wraps what I believe it to be a stainless steel box with a little locking mechanism on it here. As I open up the box, what's inside the box is you have a little bit of Iwata lube, which a little bit on the fence about. I will use it as needed. That's for a different day. Gives us a little water trap. Got our side feed cup, a little spanner wrench, and of course the airbrush itself. Most of the times I don't use these boxes once I take the airbrush out because of the fact, I always have it on hand, but I really do like that this really comes with a beautiful case to be able to store such an expensive airbrush. Now we'll talk price in a little bit. So one of the first things I noticed on this airbrush that I thought was really cool, and it's on the CMSB as well, it can be used as a righty or a lefty airbrush. It has a little plug over here on the side that you can flip over and just plug into the opposite hole, therefore putting your cup now on the side, whether you're lefty or righty. So I think that's a really cool feature. If you have to have a side feed, then you don't have to make a lefty or righty brush. So when they come out with a new brush, I like to take a look at the differences between the current brush versus the new brush. Well, in this Takumi, this is a true gravity-fed brush because as you can see the little bowl right here, the paint doesn't come down below the stem. So it goes right from the bowl through the stem, gravity-fed into the body of the airbrush. Whereas the CMSB has a cup that is lower than the stem, so it has to be siphon fed up. Now both brushes work really well. That is one of the differences between the SB and the new Takumi. So the first thing I'm looking at is the trigger. The trigger is kind of cool. It has knurls on it. It's beveled in the front, but it is kind of high. Now the front of this brush is also shortened, and I'll show you that in a minute over on the schematic when I pull it up on the computer. But the front of this brush from the trigger to the end is a little bit more compact. So this trigger is a little high as far as comfort goes if you're going to be airbrushing for a long time. So I'm going to show you a really cool upgrade to that in just a few minutes. One of the nicest features that I like on this brush, and was on the other Microns as well, is with the other brushes, if I ever wanted to adjust the needle tension, I would need to remove the guts of the airbrush. I would have to go in there with a tool to get to the nut that is right behind the little Teflon O-ring in there. And what happens is that puts pressure on that O-ring and squeezes it a little bit to put some tension onto your needle. Well, this is really cool because all you need to do is get a little flathead screwdriver, and this is open, and you can go right in there and turn the tension for that. We'll take the guard off here. You got your little safety cap right here. your needle cap, because I don't spray with the needle cap on. So this goes right onto the back of the airbrush so you don't lose it. That's not a bad feature. That's kind of cool. I like that. The one feature I don't really like about this airbrush is the trigger stop adjuster. I don't think it really should be on any airbrush, let alone a high-end airbrush. And this one doesn't have a lock. Some of them have locks where you can lock it, at least with the trigger fully pulled back, lock it, and I just forget about it. This one here, being it's a more compact design, the way my hand lays in here, sometimes my hand starts rotating this and turns it in, and I don't know it, and it's stopping my trigger. So I have to constantly watch that. Now, the way around that is, okay, I can just take it off. I really don't need it if I don't want it, if it gets, bothersome, okay? But it is there in case you want to use it. I particularly don't think anybody learning the airbrush should use it just because you want to learn how to use your finger control. Now, they say it cuts down on fatigue, but again, I'm going to show you a really cool upgrade that's going to cut down on your fatigue. So another cool feature about this brush that I really do like is the cup and the way it attaches. This cup is a 0.24 ounce, 7 milliliter cup. And it screws on just like this. And it is super easy to clean this way because when you're done, you really want to clean your cup out. You can take it out, clean your cup, you get really good in here. But what I love about this is I personally think that Iwata should have gave a smaller cup for such a precision airbrush. I think the cup's a little too big. But what's really cool is I can go over to my $60 airbrush, my Neo CN, and it has a really small cup that came with it, and it screws right on. So Iwata makes all their parts interchangeable. Now, how cool is that? So that's going to be my go-to cup on this airbrush, and I'll just reserve this one for if I have a lot of paint to spray. But I have so many other airbrushes. If I have a broad background to spray, I'm going to pull out something with a bigger needle probably and spray it like that. So I think Iwata kind of got it a little wrong on the big cup, either that or for the price they should have gave both cups with the airbrush, a small one and a big one. I think that would have been a nice touch, a nice feature. One last thing I forgot to show you is Iwata gives you a set of instructions. Now, I'm thinking again, by this point, you probably don't need all that many instructions on an airbrush, but again, just in the true Iwata fashion, they give you a test pattern of what the airbrush can do or what it did before it left the factory, showing you that it's all in proper working order. Give you a little Iwata sticker, which is always cool, always like stickers. And then they give you the actual technician from Iwata who tested your brush. So next, let's take the gun, let's break it apart, because I think every time you get an airbrush, you should learn how to take it apart, make sure you know the parts, how to take it apart, and how to put it back together. So let's go. All right, let's get to know our airbrush. First thing we want to do is take off the back. We'll undo the needle nut. Now, again, those of you who watch my videos on how I clean a brush, I don't like to pull a brush straight out the back, but I will do it this time because there's no paint on it. That's just my little OCD thing. Take our cup off. Take our air nozzle off. Take note how high that trigger is. So in order to take the trigger out, one of two ways we can pull back on the spring here and take the trigger out, or in this case, I'm just going to be taking the needle nut off. I'm going to unscrew the trigger spring all together. There's your trigger spring right there in that housing. As far as the trigger goes, you got to pull the trigger up slightly and turn, twist. Now with these triggers, there is a little recess in the back of the trigger, so you don't get messed up when you're putting the trigger back in. That little recess underneath the trigger always goes toward the back of the airbrush. All right, so now I'm going to take my spanner wrench and I'm going to take the nozzle off. Now, I get so many questions about nozzles and people breaking them and you shouldn't touch them. Look, I'm not afraid to touch my nozzles because I don't over tighten them. Okay, you just got to be very careful with this nozzle. The threads are super tiny on it. You don't want to over tighten it. See, and if you do take this off, you want to do this over some place where you're not going to lose it, because it is so tiny. It is super easy to lose. Now, these nozzles are really no different than a lot of the other nozzles in the Iwata line of airbrushes. So I take them on and off all the time, but do you risk, damaging it if you do it a lot? Sure. But you just got to make sure that you don't over tighten it when you go to put it back on. And there's all your pieces to your airbrush. Now, I never break an airbrush all the way down like this. I will take the nozzle off when I clean an airbrush because, again, I like to pull the needle out the front and not through the back. Again, that's just me. So I'm not afraid of taking this nozzle off, but I will caution again. Please use the utmost caution, and I'm going to show you how to tighten it down right now. You want to get it started. They do actually make a tool that fits right over this nozzle instead of using your fingers. I just happen to use my fingers. So I'm just going to, just so lightly tighten it down with my fingers till it stops. I'm going to put my spanner wrench on, and I'm just giving it a nudge. I'm not even putting in really any pressure on it. Okay, that's all you need. Let's put our spring back on. Now, it might have been easier to put your trigger in first, but most of the time, if you're taking your trigger out, this part's going to be on already. So in order to put your trigger on, you can't put your needle through because your needle goes through your trigger. So now, this is going to be what I think is the most innovative part, or one of the most innovative parts and upgrades to this airbrush. Got myself a Blair Lowrider trigger. So you definitely can see the height in the triggers. The Blair trigger has a little notch in the back, just like the Iwata trigger, showing you which end goes toward the back. The mechanism is designed the same way as far as the little pins in it and the way it attaches in. So you want to make sure that notch is toward the back. You go in at a slight angle to get your pins into your body, and then seat it right in, just like you would the other trigger. All right, so once you get that trigger in, you can see how much lower that trigger rides. I'm going to go over to the computer and show you this in a second. And the tilt on it forward for your finger. So when you're sitting there airbrushing a long time, and when you feel the difference in this trigger, it's just amazing. For the price, it's absolutely, one of the best upgrades that I've ever put on an airbrush. So let's put our needle back through. And then I'm going to show you one more upgrade that is going to even improve the trigger action even further. So again, when you slide that needle in, don't push it up real hard. These nozzles are pretty delicate. You can crack a nozzle. You get them all out of whack. Just nudge it up there, tighten it down. You're good to go. Let's put our air nozzle back on. Actually, before I do that, what I usually do is I back off on my needle and get it out of the way of my nozzle so I don't bend my needle. I'll stick my air nozzle on. And I do that with all my airbrushes. Loosen it back up. Again, push it forward just till it stops. Give it a twist. And we're ready to go. So the other upgrade I did is I put a Blair soft spring in the air valve body. And the combination of that spring and this trigger is just an unbelievable, it makes it spray like no other brush that I have. So let's go over to the computer real quick and I'll show you exactly what this looks like. All right, over here on the computer, you got the Iwata Micron Absolute Precision Takumi, just like we were talking about. You get a really good close-up look of it here. You got a close-up look of it with the Blair trigger and the Blair soft spring. As you can see, the soft spring is in the valve body of the airbrush. The combination between the soft spring and the trigger makes this an absolute delight to be airbrushing. If you're going to be airbrushing, for hours, it really does reduce the fatigue. I didn't think I would even like it as much as I do, but I honestly could tell you I endorse it because I just think it's one of the best innovations to an airbrush that I've used in a long time. And something else that I caught on Drew's site was that this airbrush alone sells for more than $495. This airbrush here on his site not only sells for $495, it's cheaper than anywhere that I could find on the internet. And you guys all know me, I'm a big Amazon guy, and I can't find it on Amazon or any other site for cheaper than $495. And this comes with the Blair spring and a trigger. That's a $75 value alone if you were to go buy this airbrush, you know, somewhere else, and then come over here to buy the soft spring and the trigger. It's $75. So this is an unbelievable price for those two upgrades onto this airbrush. And I do know if you go down to Drew's and take a class and you decide to buy this brush while you're at the class, this brush gets an even deeper discount than the $495. So a great deal all around. I will pop some links down below over here to Drew's site so you can pick up a soft spring or trigger if you already have a Micron. And if you don't, I highly recommend that you get this Takumi, especially after you see how it's going to spray here in just a minute. All right, so I got my brush loaded up with Createx Illustration Black, and I'm going to spray it unreduced through this 0.18 needle nozzle combination. Just to give you a reference on how small that is, the Eclipse is a 0.35. So very small needle nozzle combination on this. That's why you can get very fine lines with this. So I'm going to start as a test putting this straight through the airbrush with it unreduced. Well, I gotta say, that is the most responsive trigger that I've ever used. You barely have to pull back on it, especially when you're looking for that real fine line stuff. I mean, that just sprayed beautifully. So the brush itself, I'm very impressed with, let alone with the upgrades that I put to this brush. So as you can see, that just sprayed absolutely beautiful. Atomizes the paint really well, all the way from, you know, a broad line all the way down to a hairline. So the precision you can get with this brush, and I'd like to say with the upgraded trigger, I mean, you're barely pushing down and you're barely pulling back, and the responsiveness of it is just absolutely delightful and a joy to use. You got some really fine dots right there, some broader dots. And have you guys ever seen any of my videos before when I'm doing dagger strokes or teaching dagger strokes? I can do this little palm tree. So there you have it. Absolutely love it. The most responsive brush that I've ever used. I love all my other Iwatas, but I will tell you that this brush with the upgrades is the most responsive start, stop, and control of paint that I've ever used. Absolutely love this brush, and I expect to have this brush for the rest of my airbrushing career, just like along with the other airbrushes that I have for 20 years that are Iwatas, that again, I'm going to ride them right out for the next 20 years, hopefully. All right, well, there you have it. So for a long time, I was very apprehensive about spending that kind of money on an airbrush, because for that kind of money, I set forth certain expectations. And if it didn't meet my expectations, I would have been really disappointed with what I purchased. But I gotta say, in this case, I'm not disappointed with my purchase. It not only met my expectations, it exceeded my expectations. It has such a smooth performance. It works absolutely flawless. The trigger action on it, especially with the upgrade, the spring and the trigger, are just super spot on. So I really do love this brush. It's probably going to be my go-to brush for probably almost everything that I do. I will utilize all my other airbrushes just because I love airbrushes, but this one's going to be here to stay for a very long time. I think it's a great airbrush, and I highly recommend it for those of you who want absolute precision and get to a point in your airbrush career or your journey where you feel that you're ready for purchase like this. So with that, I hope you like this type of content. If you do, you know the drill. Hit the bell, subscribe, check out those links down below. And with that, we'll see you in the next video.